Jenny Lomiller. I'm co-chair of Internal Affairs on Student Senate with Amber here. So the way we'll do this is Matt will give us a speech, Colin will give a speech, and then afterwards we will have a time for questions. So please hold all of your questions till both of them give their speech. And yeah. So, Matt.
Okay, yeah, thanks girls.
Yep.
Yeah, first off, I just want to say thanks for the opportunity to serve you this year. It's been a great year, and I've got to learn a lot about Senate and managing a Senate and serving the campus. So when I thought about what type of platform I wanted to run on for this upcoming academic year, I thought about the current year and what all happened. I thought back to all the events and activities taking place, and one word came to mind, and that was active. It's no foreign concept to this campus being active. Between athletics, drama, theater, other organizations, I'd say that we have close to 100% involvement of students in some capacity on campus. That's really unheard of for a college, and I'd say that's a pretty active campus. But how does this relate to Student Senate? I feel that the role of Student Senate should be to support student activity. Tonight, as I'm asking for your vote, I'll briefly describe 3 types of activity, and then describe how, if I'm elected president, I'm confident that I can lead to support students in these types of activity. These 3 types of activity include activity in the classroom, activity in campus life, and spiritual activity. So first, I'll describe what the role of the Student Senate is in supporting student activity in the classroom. Ultimately, the reason for attending college is to further academic knowledge and to get a college degree. As president, I want to see to it that every student has the resources needed to succeed. I want to help lead a Senate who supports academic success and assists in academic challenges. The second type of activity that I mentioned, the Student Senate having the responsibility of supporting, was student activity in campus life. This is one of the biggest areas in which Senate is involved, and I'd say it's one of its main purposes. Between choir, theater, athletics, clubs and orgs such as the Lab Coffee Shop, the Scrapbooking Club, and TAG, I'm confident that almost every student here can find a way to be involved. I have a track record of seeing to it that every club and organization received the funding they needed this year. Furthermore, I'm a strong advocate of forming new clubs. I want to help create an easy and accessible way for clubs to exist and thrive. Just this year, we had 5 new clubs formed on campus, and I look forward to seeing many more formed in the years to come. In addition to clubs and orgs, I want to lead a Senate which effectively supports students in all areas of campus life. Whether it's driving a shuttle to local events on the weekends or creating opportunities for service projects, I want to help create an enjoyable and unforgettable experience for students in respect to their campus life. I want to listen to students' concerns and find a way to address them. I want to put you, my fellow students, first. I want to serve you by doing whatever is necessary to help support you in all aspects of your campus life. The third type of activity I mentioned the Student Senate supporting was students' spiritual activity. We're blessed to attend a college whose cornerstone is Jesus Christ, our one thing needful. And if elected, it'd be my goal to keep my focus, the Senate's focus, and all the school's focus, the entire student body, on what is most important, our one thing needful. While serving as president this year, I had a lot of time to learn about Senate, learn how to be president, how to lead, and how to seat a proper Senate function. I'm confident that if elected, I can take what I've learned this year and apply it next year to lead an even more active and effective Senate. I want to support my fellow students in all aspects of their activity in the classroom, in campus life, and in their spiritual activity. If elected president, I want to serve you by serving as an active servant leader, leading an active Senate, supporting our active campus. So thanks for your time. Thanks for coming tonight. And that's all I have.
Thank you all for being here tonight. I come before you tonight not as someone who merely wishes to be the next Bethany Lutheran College president, merely for the prestige, but simply as a fellow student who wishes to do the best that this student body has come to long expect from their student Senate president. I know that recently apathy has become an issue when discussing how the Senate should properly represent their peers. And of this I say no more. If you see I am fit as student body president, I will make the Senate more approachable, more transparently reliable, and less seen as a puppet government that attempts to be sufficiently mediocre at best when it comes to the needs, wants, and ideas of students. I wish to be the person with whom both student and faculty at this institution can come together when a disagreement arises, and I also want to with the Senate, recreate a system so that it becomes a place where the issues at hand can be properly discussed and resolved through a nonpartisan and mutually agreeable compromise being the result of these. In order for something like this to occur, I will try my utmost to keep things simple and to the point. The Senate should not be a place where the practice of cloak and dagger tactics are well known, yet they are concealed. It should be instead a place where the ability to openly and freely discuss any issue at hand is welcomed and greatly encouraged. Students who are not senators should feel well received in meetings and have the ability to voice their opinions before the vote is even cast. If elected president, I will hold myself accountable for any bill and all bills passed under my hand. I would expect my fellow senators to do the exact same. For if we cannot hold ourselves to a higher level of integrity, we should not be able to call ourselves representatives of the student body. I would like students to be able to trust leadership that they have elected to represent them. As college students, we follow the instructions of our professors that lead us and teach us, hopefully the correct information necessary to prepare us for the rest of our lives. In order to lead first, you must follow, but we're not born to follow. We, as a whole, are preparing to become leaders down the road at some point in our lives. We need these things. Why not receive things that make you better, move them closer to now, so that your goals can be accomplished now rather than later in the future? Whether that would be a printer in every dormitory to help with studies, or keeping certain on-campus gathering places or groups, such as the Coffee Lab or the TAG, respectively, up and running, since they have both this year been scrutinized recently, not just this past semester, but last semester. Because both allow students the chance to socialize and possibly even learn from one another, which can make them better people down the road in life. I come before you, not as a narcissistic, self-appointed politician, but as one of you, the real leaders at this institution, asking for your approval and your consent as student body president. I don't want to be a puppet leader on the strings of the upper echelon of the Bethany system, but humbly a fellow student who wants to do the right thing for as many students as possible here at Bethany Lutheran College. Thank you.
At this time, I'll open up to any questions that you guys might have for our candidates.
Both answer this question. I was just wondering if there's any part of this year that you felt went really well in the Senate and what the Senate did, and if there's any part that you feel needed room for improvement.
All right. Well, the good things that I saw from Senate were the fact that they started to work better as the year progressed. Not positively all the time, but they were at least working together. A lot of the negatives where you had people doing their own thing, it was more dissentious, rather than actually coming together to try and get a goal accomplished. And that's one thing that I want to accomplish, is not just within the Senate or within the student body. I want the entire college as a whole, administration, simple faculty, as well as students, to come together and try and get everything accomplished so that it's a beneficial place for everybody.
Yeah, I think the Senate this year has had a lot of major accomplishments. When you look around campus, you can see 5 new clubs are formed, and that's students forming those. But I feel the Senate supports those clubs. When you go in Luther Hall, you'll see a new space created specifically for students, and that was funded and designed and pushed forward by the Senate. I think that was one of the Senate's major accomplishments this year. The Senate also, in an effort to make it more accessible for students to form clubs, took away a deadline for clubs to be formed. So that made it more accessible for students to form clubs. I see a lot of great potential in Senate for years to come. When you look at our cabinet, we have on there, myself as the president, our other cabinet members are, one is a sophomore and the other 3 are all freshmen. So I think that another positive this year to Senate was a lot of leadership that was developing its potential at a very, at some of the lower class years, the lower years. And that'll show for the Senate years to come. So I think the Senate has a lot of potential right now, has a lot of potential to develop into an even more effective Senate.
You mentioned in your speech that both the lab and TAG were scrutinized. It seems to me that throughout the year, the lab was relatively successful, and TAG has been having events with pretty good success throughout the entire year. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, your points are both correct. With the lab, there was scrutiny whether to close it initially, and then there was ideas of closing it and revamping it for something else. And then TAG was having issues with, getting, permission because of the fact that they use Nerf guns for their thing, and a lot of policies prohibit guns in general. That was a lot of the loopholes that they had to try to work with, was to, see if they could use the Nerf stuff. But also when you think about the Nerf guns and stuff like that, you have to think about the ammo, and that's what they were really trying to get was, more ammo, maybe some Nerf balls so they can play dodgeball and hopefully not hurt anybody, but you never know with certain people. The reason why I brought up these two exact issues was because of the fact that they're both near and dear to me. I participate in a lot of Nerf tag events, and I'm in the coffee shop a lot. And so for me, these are big issues because I take them personally. The coffee lab was actually one of the reasons why I came to Bethany. It was a place where kids could come together and just hang out, and you had the chance for a cup of coffee if you need that late, night boost for studying.
Thanks.
I just have a comment too I'd like to make. The Senate this year has been really proactive in supporting the lab coffee shop. The lab coffee shop was in need of some financial assistance, and the Senate this year, with me completely behind it and all our senators behind it, funded new lighting in the lab, and that dollar figure was $1,300, and the Senate's budget is $40,000. So of that $40,000, $1,300 went to helping the lab exist as an organization on campus. So the Senate this year is very much in support of the lab. I'd say that, and also with TAG too. The Senate recognizes TAG as an official student club and organization, and also assists TAG with their funding. So I'd say the Senate does support both of those aspects on campus. And I personally think it's great to have niches on campus for students to get involved, new clubs. I'm all for that. I think it's great to have a diverse group of activities present for students.
That's correct. Also, do you plan on seeing that's going to kind of be continued support for the lab and TAG? And if so, do you want to elaborate on what that would be?
Sure, yeah. The Senate worked with TAG. We have what's called BAC here at Bethany Activities Committee, and they're in charge of putting on all the activities on campus. When TAG arose, Team Activities Guild, we saw two groups now that both offered activities. And with the BAC already existing, we didn't want TAG to step on any of the ground of the BAC, but we did see that TAG had some valuable activities to offer. So what we did is we recognized TAG and support TAG, but encouraged them to work cooperatively with the BAC, and they now serve as a subset of the BAC. With the lab, I could see the lab thriving for years to come. I think a lot of that comes down to the lab's individual leadership. If the lab itself has great leadership, I think it has the potential to thrive. This year, actually, too, there might be some misunderstandings out there. There was some money available to revamp the lab and possibly turn it into something else. And Senate was consulted to consult the students. So the college asked Senate, hey, what do you think about this on behalf of the students? So it wasn't necessarily the Senate's idea that, oh, you know what, we gotta do something about revamping the lab, or we want to create new space. It more was the Senate was used as a consultant for the student body, and that's ultimately what the role of the Senate is, to be a liaison between the faculty and staff. So,
yeah. Last year I was part of how TAG originally was brought into conception with the Humans versus Zombies, and now with TAG over in the SFC. I'm not going to complain about moving from Old Main to SFC, but I have attended several TAG events this year, and I have felt that the event as a whole has suffered very heavily from the rules imposed by, I don't know, by either the Senate or the Dean or anything like that, but I felt it has lost a lot of its original flair just with all the stuff that you have to do now.
Yeah.
I feel it's lost a lot.
Sure. No, I appreciate your comments. That's what the Senate ultimately is for, to hear out student concerns, student suggestions, find a way to address them. So, I, supporting the Senate, would completely love to hear your concern and definitely sit down with you and discuss it. I do know that the moving of the TAG activities from Old Main to the gym was actually not a Senate decision. That was an administrative decision. But the Senate, by all means, could definitely hear your concern and voice that to the administration. I do know that I think that the administration ultimately has student safety and concern as they're primary concern. I know there was some injuries last year in Old Main, and I think that one of their main efforts was to provide a more safe atmosphere. So I think that ultimately the best intentions were present in that decision.
To be on BAC for next year. So my question is, what would both of you here, what would you do if Senate was forced to overcompensate for the loss of BAC members? Like, let's say BAC only has like 3 people, Senate's gonna have to do something about that, hoping we have people, but looks like we do, so that's good to know.
I'd say first, have representatives of the BAC, the ones that are still there, contact their friends, see if they're interested in helping, because that way it can become more of a close-knit thing rather than, everybody having their own different thing they want to do. Second, I would say try and email it out to the student population. Have a email saying, would you want to do this? Yes, they've been not so successful in the past sending emails out because everybody says delete when it comes to BAC usually. But the main idea is you want to try and get that word out, not just the message in front of them. You want to actually talk to a person. Try and set that up, so it's members of the BAC actually going out and recruiting people rather than just sending an email out all the time.
Sure, and now I guess if I was elected president, was in that role, and had that challenge to take on, and say the BAC only had 3 representatives, just thinking right now I can come up with a few possible solutions. So say recruitment efforts via email and daily bulletin and the scrolling TVs didn't work, and they still ended up ultimately only having 3 members. One, the BAC is a student organization. If they don't have enough members to exist, that's unfortunate. But ultimately, maybe that responsibility would come back to the Senate. And the Senate in years past did all student activities and Senate functions. And it was about 3 years ago that the BAC was created. So it wouldn't be anything necessarily too new to the Senate. I think they could take that back as a responsibility. If they did it then, they can probably, I'm confident we could do it now. So maybe an option is, one, the BAC temporarily is postponed and activities are done by Senate. Possibly, the Senate could appoint senators to assist in the BAC. The BAC could still exist with help from senators. So maybe there could be a mutual BAC Senate group. I could see that happening. I could see maybe the BAC and Senate having a closer relationship where maybe BAC is temporarily a committee of the Senate and then staffed by Senate members who in turn put on the activities. Because absolutely, next year, the activities will still go on. And I'll make, if I was president, ultimately, that would be the Senate's responsibility to see to it that activities are put on. So there will be a solution. There's a few different options. So.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Made the point that you wanted to make sure that Senate was more unified and there was less dissension. How would you go about doing that?
I would first off try and find the people for each group that clicked with that certain group. If people have an interest in something, let them do that rather than you're going to be in this group, you're going to be in this group, and you're going to be in that one. It's going to be more based on what you want to do, how motivated you are. The more motivated people I'm going to put in one group, so that way they're not killing the rest of the group and they're like, oh, this person's taking over, I don't want to be with these people anymore. I would rather have it so everybody gets along, there's good chemistry in each group, so that way when we come back to a whole as a Senate, everybody's ready to go. It's not just, I'm going to let them do it, or I'm going to take control and I'm just going to take the bull by the horns and keep going with it. It's going to be more of trying to figure out every little piece of the puzzle. You got to try and find the people who work well together, people who aren't going to overbear on other projects. They're not going to get time management problems where they have their schoolwork to issue with, and then they have students and then they have another activity. So if you can find people who can balance everything at the same time, keep everything to a normal, try and elevate everybody's motivation. If you can get those kind of people in each group, basically your job as president is set.
Do you feel you know the senators well enough to do that, or you will by that time?
I feel I know a lot of the older ones. I'd love to start to learn more of the younger ones, like Jenny and Amber's names, and a lot of the younger guys, as well as the ones coming in. I'd rather be able to work with everybody as a whole. I know a lot of the older ones. I need to learn the younger ones. That'd be the biggest thing, is bringing everybody together.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to add one comment quick, if that's okay. I'm very proud of the senators we have this year. I could be wrong, but as kind of a facilitator of the Senate, especially during Senate session, I'd say we have a strong group of senators this year, and I myself didn't notice too much dissension. I saw a lot of good, constructive debate, and I think that's what Senate's all about. But Cubby, I'd like to. It would be great to have some specific examples of where in our Senate this year we had some, dysfunction going on and dissension, because I feel we have a strong group this year. And one thing I tried to stress was letting the senators be in control. The senators are elected by the student body. Ultimately, they're the representation, and they make the decisions. The president doesn't even have voting power. So ultimately, the Senate is at the hands of the senators. At the beginning of the year, I encouraged senators to pick what committees they wanted to serve on. And I asked for volunteers to serve as cabinet head and as chairs of committees, as opposed to just appointing. So I like to say that as president this year, I tried to put as much power as I could into the hands of senators, and that'd be something I look forward to doing next year as well. Sorry, you had a question, Grace?
I had a question. Both of you touched on this a little bit about how the Student Senate is a representation, a liaison between the students and the administration. And the students need to hear what Senate says. So my question relates to transparency. I know this year that Student Senate has established a Facebook page, but for me that really hasn't gotten off the ground. Most of the communication of the Senate is through Audrey's emails. We see, what the Senate does, but I need to hear what the Senate says. So my question for both of you is, how would you increase transparency?
If you want to start, Shane.
I would first off send the minutes out from each meeting to the actual student body, so that way, if they want to read them, they're there for them. They don't have to, go and try and find them some random desk. Also, I would rather be able to invite them, like I said in my speech, and welcome them into each group or each committee if they wanted to, voice their opinion to a small forum rather than the whole. Another thing is I'd rather have, what I hear from the dean and from administration go down to everybody else. I wouldn't want to just keep it to myself. I need to tell everybody else below me in Senate and the rest of the student population, because they're ultimately the ones who are paying for an education, and they're the ones that make this entire college go round. If they don't even know what's going on about what's going on with their education, how are they supposed to understand what's going on and want to be here?
Yeah, and that's a great question. If the Senate is supposed to be a liaison between students and administration and supposed to represent the students and listen to students, they should be very visible around campus. And something that was a goal of mine at the beginning of this year was finding a way to boost communication. When I looked at the Senate the previous year before and tried to think what are things that I could bring to my term that would be great, would be boosting communication. And we did do that through emails, and that's always, a lot of people delete them. And we try to do things through the daily bulletin. We do have a bulletin board. One thing I really stressed our Senate doing to help students was create a club and orgs bulletin board that offered information on every club or organization that's out there. That was new this year, and so that's up there to boost communication. And ultimately, too, when we got the TVs, I requested that the Senate have permission to put up whatever information they like on there that's relevant to campus. And also, there is a scroll bar setup that Senate can use. And TVs just came online, just a few days ago. So we're still working on that scroll bar, but there would be a scroll bar that the Senate and BAC could have their information on. I think that'd be a huge communication tool. And I'm always open for hearing more suggestions on how to boost communication in the end of my term and if elected next year, too.
Next.
Question, but I just wanted to thank you guys for both running for student body president. It's a lot of work if you get elected, and just the fact that you running shows a lot of character and a lot of courage. I know it can be a little nerve-wracking at times, putting your neck out in public, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you, Brad.
All right, thank you guys all for coming, and like Brett said, thank you both for running.
Yeah, thanks.
Election day will be the 22nd and then also the 23rd. Before chapel, they'll have a table up in Hunzy Hall, and then during the lunch hour, there'll be a table outside the cafeteria on the 22nd and then also on the 23rd. So make sure you come and vote, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Willis.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Thanks, Amber.